Yes, two different things. A guardianship. No, a power of attorney. In a power of attorney document, you can have financial powers and welfare powers. And a power of attorney you put in place while you still have legal capacity to do so. If you lose capacity, then a relative or a friend has to petition the court to be appointed as a guardian, and you can have welfare guardians and financial guardians. Gosh, well, that's expensive.
Jan Killeen, are you in the audience somewhere? Because I know you had a lot to do with the Adult Incapacity Act and putting all this through. Yeah.
Yes. What this discussion is bringing to mind is that the Mental Welfare Commission, and I happen to be on the board of the Mental Welfare Commission at the moment, I remember about a year or two back produced a guideline on using powers under the Adults with Incapacity Act for care homes, and I think also could be useful for hospitals, around issues of guardianship and powers of attorney, and what people are allowed to do and not allowed to do, what you do around issues around consent to treatment. So there are some actually very good guides around. I also, with Alzheimer's Scotland, did some research with carers who had powers of attorney and guardianship to identify what problems they were experiencing. And an outcome from that was a guide that is freely available from Alzheimer's Scotland for carers around decision making. And it talks about how you can support the individual to make decisions themselves. So whether you have guardianship or power of attorney, there are certain principles which have to be respected so that you support the individual's independence, respect their human rights as far as possible before just you don't just take over decision making because you have power of attorney or guardianship. And I think that there's a lot of misunderstanding still, both amongst professionals and probably amongst carers about what access they have to legal recourse so that they can support the person and protect the person, as well as actually understand the limits to their powers. So that there is quite a lot of information available now, plus a DVD for people with dementia, another one for people with learning disabilities. I believe it's still available, which explains what their rights are. People need to know what their rights are.
Thank you very much. Yes, and Peter also.
Look at Patricia Howe here. There was a really good training document for professionals called Think Capacity, Think Consent, and it's there for everyone, and it takes you step by step through this with examples, answers all the questions. No need for any professional to be confused.
Peter wanted to say
a couple of big points. Firstly, I mean, not to take any business away from our sponsors, but you can actually do the power of attorney yourself. I mean, from the Office of the Public Guardian's website, it will give you a sample of the power of attorney document, and you then you have to get a medical practitioner to say that you have capacity at the time, and hopefully you can persuade your GP or whatever not to charge. So the first thing is you can actually do it much cheaper than what is being done. Second thing I would say is that if you have a power of attorney document, it's well worthwhile sending the documentation to the medical records department of your local hospital, because one of the biggest problems for us is people come into a hospital, but we have no idea that there's a power of attorney in place. And searching around for things is time consuming and things can get missed. But if it is there with the medical records, there's a chance it will be stored in that person's medical record, and that will be of assistance. And the last thing I would say, and just for Jan as well in her Mental Welfare Commission role, is that one thing that is lacking out of these acts, the Mental Health Act and the Adults with Incapacity Act, is the ability to get somebody into a care home urgently if they don't agree to it. You know, that is not the point when you've got someone stressed out their box at home looking after a person who may be very disturbed behaviourally or whatever, physically unwell, you know, who's saying, I'm not going anywhere, I'm not going anywhere, you know, I don't understand what's happening. That's not the time to start a guardianship application, which will take weeks and weeks and weeks to do. So a bit of legislation that allows, you know, a rapid transfer of someone, you know, a week perhaps in a care home to allow some sort of treatment maybe of an acute infection without them going into hospital, you know, and then back out. This is something that's missing from the profile of the legislation that we have. 13ZE, if the person is going to be passive and not resist, but if they're saying, I'm not going to your home, well, they're probably going to end up in hospital, and that's really going to be a huge problem for people.
Just quick, again, I think this is an area where there are some practical solutions. It would actually be cheaper for the government to fund power of attorney for everybody than the cost of the delays in hospital through people not having them. We have a failure cost in the system as it is. So that point...
Jeff, is that your jaw dropping there?
Or the sums have been done. That you don't, Jeff...
I guess I was concerned about nationalising legal services instead.
No, well, sorry. Actually making cost not a barrier. And I take your point about people being able to do it for themselves, but not everybody's going to want to do that. So actually just and this is about anticipatory care planning. I was thinking about Anne and Henry in the front row there. I mean, that actually, within primary health and the other discussions about anticipatory care plans, that's where the discussion about a power of attorney should be located. So it's actually something which it is a saving to the public purse if it's in place. It's a cost to the public purse if it's, as well as a cost to the people if it's not in place. So it's not beyond us to come up with a workable model.
We've got it already. That's exactly what the post-diagnostic support's about. And within the post-diagnostic support, there are 5 pillars, and one of these pillars is planning for future decision making, which will encourage people to think about how they see their time living with the illness, what they want, and start to think about building that into the powers of attorney. It's not the point of just having the power of attorney, it's what powers you want to give people and why. It's the conversations that occur behind that that's important, and then making sure you've got the right power in place to deliver that. That's what the post-diagnostic process starts. That's how we can change things.
And that's the reason why you shouldn't just download, sorry, Peter, from the Public Guardian's website, because you should make sure that you have the correct powers that you need. Jeff?
But I think another dimension to this, and if you're looking at something which is likely going to cost you a different, a sum of money, it's also going to involve you in quite a difficult conversation. And certainly from the work that we did in Midlothian around with families for people who've been recently diagnosed with dementia, we found conversations with families were often quite difficult as well. You mentioned Tommy on tour and the work that he's done in terms of his experience in gathering letters and experience, but one of the most telling aspects of the story which he tells is at the point at which he began to care for his mother, there was a sense that everybody disappeared, and that he was then the person it was almost like he'd been playing Tig and he got caught. And that's another example of the difficult conversations which we find it difficult to have. So my sense broadly around this is we will need to come back and look at AWI, and we will need to look at guardianship, because at the moment it just seems too complex for us to be able to operate regularly and predictably on the ground. That's why it's difficult in hospital situations, it's difficult in care home situations. So we need to think about that. But equally, Malcolm on his side, the team that work with my team on this, they're doing work on trying to create greater ability across the system to work with difficult conversations. Because a lot of these issues are issues because we can't talk about them, because we can't have that discussion about whether it's now the time to consider a power of attorney, or we can't have a discussion as to which brother or which sister does the weekends, and it ends up with people feeling very much unprotected and unable to voice concerns that they've got.
Thank you very much for that. A very quick one then, because we are already over time. And Thank you. Thank you very much. We've more or less run out of time. We haven't looked at research, so I just want, finally, Peter, just if you could just fill us in briefly on where we've got to with research into the causes of the various dementias at the moment, and indeed thinking of the, in 30 seconds. And also, you know, the G8 summit and how Scotland is set to respond to that or not.
Well.
1 minute starting now,
1 minute starting
followed
now.
by Jeff.
Right, where have we got to? Not very far, not as far as we need to get. We have some understanding of the scientific basis of dementia as far as the development of Alzheimer's disease is concerned. We have much less understanding about how vascular dementias and other types of dementia tend to develop, and yet in Scotland we grow our own vascular disease. As you well know, we have expertise amongst the general population.
Peter, sorry, just on that, why so little on vascular dementia? Is it not sort of sexy, or what?
It's even unsexier than Alzheimer's disease, you know. Alzheimer's disease has always been considered by the pharmaceutical industry as a sort of potential manna from heaven, that there was a 1, 2, 3 stepwise cascade of problems with one molecule converting into another, and then that made it into Alzheimer's disease over time. And if you could stop that, well, you know, you would stop Alzheimer's disease. So they've been focused on this. The first drugs that came out were very effective, particularly in mice. Unfortunately, the mice all died. So, you know, it wasn't, you know, a very good cure. But nonetheless, they then kind of realized it was going to be much more complicated. As far as treatments are concerned, then we have a long way to go. In the last 10 years, there have been no new treatments, either symptomatic treatments or potentially curative treatments that have been effective. We have no real alternatives to some of the drugs that we've had to use. For instance, antidepressants don't work as well necessarily in people with dementia. Antipsychotics have their risks. Non-pharmacological interventions, we're always told use these first, but which one do you use for which behaviour, for what length of time and what dose on its own, in what order, you know, with drugs, without drugs, you know, all of these questions still need to be answered. As far as what you do for families, well, we know that much of the stress in families arises within 6 months of the onset of symptoms, but yet people don't present for usually at least 18 to 24 months. So that's a whole year's worth of potential intervention that is being lost, but we still don't know which are the most effective interventions in that period of the 6 to 12 months after the onset of symptoms, which might reduce stress. But we do know that the stress that starts at that point leads to irreversible changes between that person with dementia, their family members, their social networks, and it's those degree of irreversible changes that are the best predictor of whether you're going to end up in care or not. So there's a whole research agenda, and if you think that the social services and the health services are rather disjointed and dysfunctional when it comes to working together, well, in the research field, I can assure you it's a lot worse. And what we don't have, and remember in the Commitment 15 of the National Dementia Strategy, and these aren't prioritised, Commitment 15 is about improving research, you know, and as yet we don't have any health boards in Scotland, to my knowledge, who have produced how they are going to implement that part of the dementia strategy, with clear statements about how they're going to invest in their parts of research. And as far as the G8 is concerned, the UK government have certainly said they are investing. The MRC, the Medical Research Council, is putting forward 50 million. The Alzheimer's Research UK is putting forward 100 million over 10 years. There's a doubling in funding coming for various other things. There's a drug discovery on the go, and so on and so on. What we don't have from Scotland at the moment is what Scotland is doing about G8.
Jeff.
Okay, what's Scotland doing about G8? Well, Scotland.
That was masterly, by the way.
Yeah, it was. I'd also avoided the degree to which the Scottish Dementia Research Consortium has a role in delivering on Commitment 15 as well, but passing that over to health boards was really quite neat. We had a discussion this afternoon with Department of Health about G8 follow-up. We've been talking with the Department of Health for about 3 or 4 weeks now. We intend to have a international follow-up conference in Edinburgh on the 9th and 10th of June, focusing on work on diagnosis, post-diagnostic support, and care coordination. So those are the 3 areas that we'll be focusing on. We'll be doing that in the context of a human rights framework. The Department of Health will be making, indeed, I believe potentially the Prime Minister will be making an announcement later on in this week about further follow-up work, including significant announcements for what's going on within England, which unfortunately I can't tell you, on the basis I'd get into an enormous amount of trouble.
We won't tell, Jeff.
That's what they said last time, and here I am, still here 6 years on, having done 2 dementia strategies. So there is further activity. They're also going to draw together a UK-wide group led by the Department of Health, with Scotland fully participating in that. And part of our objective within that will be to be talking about Scotland's corner in respect of research. It's a conversation that Henry and I have been having over the last couple of months, which is the degree to which the Prime Minister's original commitments, which were UK commitments, haven't cascaded into research work coming to Scotland, and our commitment is to change that. Beyond that, on G8, in probably the beginning of June, we've got an event in England on different funding models, different organisational structures to deliver improved dementia care, and in August, the Japanese, being one of the 3 partner countries in terms of the next stage work, will be pulling together their event on prevention of dementia and on innovation in dementia care. And again, they need to be at the forefront of that work. So we're seeing a very concerted effort in following up on G8, and a lot of activity to go behind the commitments that were made.
Thank you very much. Well, that's a nice note to end on. I'm afraid, ladies and gentlemen, that is all that we've got time for. We really must do this again sometime. There isn't really time to answer it, so if you don't mind, I won't out because it's 8 o'clock now, and I really got to stop. But I'd like to ask you to join me in thanking our panel here. I think they're more or less still talking to each other. Thank you very much for coming and participating. Thank you also again to our sponsors, TC Young, and to Alzheimer's Scotland for all their work in organising the evening. Thank you very much to you for coming and participating. I hope that you will feel free to continue the discussion over some light refreshments downstairs. The conversation will, I am assured, be continued, and feedback will be sent out through Dementia Challenge magazine, through social media, and Alzheimer's Scotland, I think, Henry, are going to feed it into policy discussions. Is that right?
We'll report on this in terms of Dementia Scotland magazine, but about everything that we get in this type of format, we will talk into our ongoing membership forums and policy discussions, and then talk to guys like Jeff about it.
And what we should really do is invite all these people back in 6 months' time and say, what have you done about it? But thank you very much for coming, and safe home. Thank you.